Hi, it's been a while since I've made one of these, but there's something I've been meaning to talk about. And I'm outside. I hope you can hear me fine over the sound of the birds. So, have you ever noticed that a lot of our media is very monarchy friendly? And it seems very natural, doesn't it? Like the trope of the noble king or the valiant prince or the benevolent princess. How they love their land, how they fight for their people. It seems very natural. It's a staple of our cultural landscape. But it's not natural, actually, when you think about it. We, the royal we, no pun intended, we've fought literal wars to get rid of these pieces of shit. And with good reason. Yet here we stand. I started thinking about this in installments. Like, a while back I was watching Brave again. It's a cute cartoon, I like it. But right at the beginning of it, the princess, she's complaining about the injustice of her fate, her lack of agency over her own destiny. And yes, that is a sentiment that we can all sympathize with, but bitch, you're surrounded by servants. A whole bunch of people that lack all agency over their own fates, over the course of their own lives. Because of you. That felt so goddamn insufferable to me. But I tried it on, watched the movie, okay. I have also recently played Dishonored 2, and there was a little bit of that as well. You know, you get royalty pouring their hearts out about how they feel sad about the hungry masses of their kingdoms, whilst draped in silk dresses, walking amongst the halls of their own castles, eating in their own banquets. Isn't there something wrong with that picture? You're part of the problem. I'm not supposed to like you, but these games, these movies, they are all telling me otherwise. They're telling me that I'm supposed to sympathize with you, the ruler. That's not how things work. Or, that's not how things are supposed to work. And the final straw came when I tried playing
Crusader Kings 3.
the latest one. I didn't get very far, the mechanics didn't jive very well with me, but that's more of a gamer preference thing, nothing against the game in that regard. But the whole premise of the game is for you to build a successful royal bloodline from the player's perspective, from our perspective. We are successful by maintaining the rule of monarchy over the world. And a lot of these strategy games, they're all like that, right? You have this one character or bloodline. And you can even rewrite history to have kings ruling modern countries that are democratic now. Neo-2 was also extremely egregious in this regard. Samurais, shoguns, Japanese emperors, and warlords are just cool-looking assholes in kimonos. I do not stand for them. So, why is this important? Why am I talking about this? I'm talking about this because I think it speaks to a higher truth of our shared cultural landscape. And it comes in two tiers. First, it speaks to our inability to reckon with our own past. We seem to have this tendency that is arguably driven by cultural identity, driven by how we relate to the history of our nations, to the history of our people, and how we derive some of our personal identity from that, in which we are willing to embrace the good parts, but are reluctant to admit to the ugly ones. And that leads to a lot of historical reconstruction, not revisionism. Historical revisionism is good, being able to look back at our history with a set of more critical eyes and analyzing it for what it was, that's good. But reconstructing our history, changing it to fit our point of view, that's a dangerous path to tread, my friends. For example, a lot of ultra-conservative, fundamentalist movements, they sure seem to spend a lot of time talking about going back to the good times, right? Or fascism has in its discourse this core component of hearkening back to this abstract classical golden age and the need to save us all from the modern degeneracy by taking us back to it. You can find that in the speeches of virtually every fascist dictator and dictator wannabe. This practice is a lot more pervasive and a lot more insidious than we'd like to think it is. And this cultural backdrop that raises us all to rewrite our own history serves as a psychological white noise that makes us all more amenable to these concepts. Fuck birds. For a little bit of context, fascism itself is a very modern phenomenon. Fuck you. You can also currently find these arguments in the speeches of politicians all around the world, and it's also present in the recruitment efforts of certain more radical groups as well. There's a reason why a certain group has a Grand Wizard, for instance. And we can even look into the future, if you like. For example, there are running jokes about inbreeding in Dynasty Kings. It's all fun and games, literally. It's making light of that period of time, and it's actually funny, I'll confess to it myself. But again, for perspective's sake, we would all be a little appalled if one such game were to make as much fun of the atrocities of the Holocaust. Not all of us, unfortunately, which is also a part of the problem, But regardless, in this context, it seems to be because of how recent the Holocaust was. Now, fast forward a few more decades, soon it will be 100 years, maybe 150, 200 years after the fact. And we will be as much removed from the Holocaust as we are now from the monarchies of the Middle Ages, and all the atrocities they have committed, from all the genocides and suffering and the Inquisition and its witch hunts. 50 years from now, it may seem as natural to make fun of the Holocaust as it is today to make fun of the monarchies. Meaning, once again, we will have rewritten our history. We will have failed to reckon with our past. We will have failed once again to learn anything at all. Yes, I am home now. The noise was getting a little bit too much. So, that second tier I was talking about. I think this effort is part of a broader cultural concept, namely our inability to reconcile our own perspectives with reality itself. I know it kinda sounds like an outlandish statement, but there's actually no shortage of examples of that. Very current, very prominent examples of that. We have flat earthers, anti-vaxxers, anti-maskers. Do you like anti-vaxxers? Because that's how you get anti-vaxxers. People that are unable or unwilling to accept the reality in which they live in, for various reasons. And let's be clear, this does not speak to their character necessarily. And it's not necessarily their individual fault. Like I said, we're all constantly primed for it. And these are very extreme examples, but there are other more dilute versions of it as well, like quote-unquote basic racism. That is a form of madness in its own right, isn't it? It's completely divorced from reality, or climate change denialism. That's also completely divergent from reality, but a lot of people are on board with it. And I don't believe I forgot to mention this, but perhaps most importantly, this kind of thinking also makes us more primed to accept the supposedly inevitable existence of a ruling class, which is also another facet of how capital realism can make itself pervasive enough to convince us of these quote-unquote truths without giving us the headspace to even question them. And this angle that I'm coming from, that's not meant to be like an aha argument that will solve everything or anything for that matter, but it is possibly one way to start looking at the problem for what it is. All these bad things I've been talking about, they are symptoms that grow from and come through our collective cultural landscape, lingering in the back of our heads at all times. And if we can't bring ourselves to look at something as simple as this, monarchy stands in media and video games, as something that might actually be a part of the problem, regardless of how small a part it may be, and as something that we should probably fix, if we can't even change that, then Can we even change anything at all? This is not an alarmist stance, but I also have no silver linings for you. I just think that all the big problems we have to fix are a lot more complex and a lot more nuanced than public discourse will usually make it out to be. And I think it's important to be aware of the many pieces that may be contributing to it. A lot of the pieces we may be a part of, actually, and that might be influencing the way we think about these things, about how we perceive the problems of the world and the possible solutions for it. Collectively speaking, culture isn't just an expression of ourselves. It's not just a byproduct. It also helps to inform who we are, how we think. And a lot of the cultural artifacts we consume are tailor-made for us. Whether it's conscious or not, they are always telling us something. There is always a message being delivered. And if we can't read the message for what it is, then we're gonna be helpless against it. So, to finish this off, again, I'm not saying these are bad games or bad movies or that you're bad for liking them. All I'm saying is stop and think a little bit about what they're saying, alright? Until next time, stay safe and see you around.